March 5th, 2016, at the Intercontinental Hotel in Century City, Los Angeles. We have grainy security footage, but what it shows is clear. A woman dressed in black walks towards an elevator. A man in a towel follows her into the hallway, grabs her by the neck, and throws her to the ground. The woman in the footage is Cassandra Ventura, a singer who goes by the name Cassie. And the man in the footage is Sean Combs, the music mogul known as Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, or just Diddy, or even the Diddler now. Diddy and Cassie were together for 9 years at the time the events in the surveillance footage unfolded. A security guard named Israel Flores witnessed part of the assault, and according to his testimony, Diddy approached him afterward with a sack of cash, which was a bribe, to keep what he saw to himself, and he would get $50,000, which to him was a life-changing amount of money for a guard that's making $10.50 an hour. And this video existed for 8 years before anyone outside that hotel saw it, and when it finally surfaced in May of 2024, Sean Combs issued an apology on Facebook. He said, "I was truly sorry."
I'm truly sorry.
He also said, "I hit rock bottom."
I was up. I hit rock bottom.
But obviously, an apology is not enough and was not going to be enough, and by then the floodgates had already opened and more than 120 people had come forward with allegations against the Diddler. Federal agents had raided his homes, a grand jury was meeting in New York, and for the footage, which showed clearly his crime, it wasn't even the worst of what he'd done. This is the story of how America's most successful music mogul faced allegations of racketeering, sex trafficking, and landed behind bars for charges related to prostitution. The man who threw the party everyone wanted to attend was running something far darker behind closed doors. Before he was Diddy, before he was the Diddler, before he was Puff Daddy, Sean Combs was a 22-year-old party promoter with big ambitions and even bigger crowds. On December 28th, 1991, at City College of New York, a celebrity charity basketball game featuring Heavy D, Boyz II Men, and Run DMC was being held, with a portion of the proceeds going to AIDS education outreach programs. The gymnasium at Nat Holman Hall held 2,730 people, and an estimated 5,000 people showed up, nearly double the capacity. When security tried to close the doors, the crowd outside surged. They screamed, "Let us in!" A stairwell became a crush zone. People fell, other people fell on top of them. 9 people were trampled to death at the bottom of those stairs. The youngest was 16, the oldest was 29, and many more were injured in the tragic crowd-crushing event. It was like Travis Scott in Astroworld, but 30 years earlier and without that delicious McDonald's sandwich. Sean Combs was one of the promoters of this event. He had helped organize the event, and it became known as the Stampede at City College. The families obviously sued the event. The settlement totaled $3.8 million. Combs personally paid $750,000 at the time, though no criminal charges were ever filed against him. 9 people had died, 8 at the scene, and 1 later as a result of injuries sustained. A check was written, and then life just moved on. Not to say that this sort of paints the picture of how Sean Combs does business, because it's very dark and he's definitely not a mass murderer type serial killer guy, but writing checks to make problems go away is absolutely a pattern that defines Sean Combs and his career as a bad dude. People get hurt, or in this case, die, money changes hands, and nobody goes to jail. Combs grew up in Mount Vernon, New York. His father, Melvin, was shot dead when he was just 3 years old, and his mother, Janice, raised him and his sister alone, working multiple jobs to give them a middle-class life. By the time he enrolled at Howard University in 1987, Combs was driven in a way that most people couldn't match. He dropped out after just 2 years to take an internship at Uptown Records at just 20 years old, and within months, the intern was running A&R, which is the Artists and Repertoire Department. He signed Mary J. Blige, and he produced her debut album called What's the 411, which went triple platinum in 1992.
What's the 411, huh?
When Combs' star had risen and he was seemingly on top, Andre Harrell, the founder of Uptown, fired him in 1993, and years later, Harrell would say he did it to set Combs free and to force him to build his own empire. I'm not exactly sure what kind of strange motivation that is.
Because I didn't do it to hurt him, but I knew it was time for him to grow, and the only way he could grow was if he was going to have the same kind of corporate conversations that I was subjected to.
For whatever reason, it worked, and Combs launched Bad Boy Records with a $1.5 million deal from Clive Davis at Arista in 1993, and later leveraged its success into a $10 to $15 million deal during renegotiations in 1996. It was a pretty big deal in the early 90s, just right after starting his career. Combs also took one artist with him from Uptown Records, a 21-year-old rapper from Brooklyn named Christopher Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G. Ready to Die dropped in September 1994, and it went 4 times platinum and made Bad Boy a household name. Faith Evans, Mace, The Lox, 112, Total, the roster kept growing. With the roster getting bigger, the hits kept coming as well. By the mid-90s, Sean Puff Daddy Combs was one of the most powerful people in music. He became Puff Daddy. And in 1998, Combs signed an 18-year-old rapper from Brooklyn named Jamal Barrow, stage name Shine.
Shake the feds and bust shots at them street cops.
And Jamal had talent, but he had no idea what he was walking into. If you wanted to know who mattered in America between 1998 and 2009, you could check the guest list for a Diddy White Party. You've seen the images of these things. They are unbelievable. Every Labor Day in the Hamptons, there was an all-white dress code. Champagne was flowing. The biggest names in music, film, sports, and politics were all mingling on Diddy's lawn. Martha Stewart was there, Ashton Kutcher, Jay-Z, Jennifer Lopez, Paris Hilton, Leonardo DiCaprio. At its peak, getting an invitation meant you had arrived. The parties looked like so much fun and the pinnacle of success. Beautiful people in white linen, dancing in the summer air, toasting to the good life. That's what everyone saw. That's what the photos showed. But behind the white linen and champagne, something else was happening. Something that we obviously now know, but wouldn't become public for over 2 decades. In 2005, a 19-year-old singer from Connecticut named Cassandra Ventura signed a record deal with Bad Boy. This was Cassie, and within 2 years, she and Diddy were in a relationship. She was just 19 years old when they had met, and he was 37 years old. And their relationship would last 11 years, from 2007 to 2018, even 2 years after our surveillance footage. Also in 2005, a 21-year-old singer named Dawn Richard auditioned for Making the Band 3, and she made the cut and joined Danity Kane, the girl group Diddy was putting together for MTV. She'd work under his management for the next 8 years, and she had no idea what she was about to witness. So 3 people, Cassie, Shine, and Dawn, Cassandra, Jamal, and Dawn. Each of them had entered Diddy's orbit believing they were getting their big break, and each of them would have to pay a price that they never agreed to. Back to the 90s, on December 27th, 1999, at Club New York in Manhattan, the first cracks in the glamorous Diddy image would start to form. Diddy is there with his girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez, and his newest artist, 19-year-old Shine. The club is packed, some words get exchanged, and an argument erupts, and then gunshots. 3 people are struck by the gunfire. A woman named Natanya Rubin was shot in the face. After this, police arrest Diddy, Lopez, and Shine. Jennifer Lopez is released quickly, and Diddy and Shine go to trial. The prosecution's theory is that Shine fired the shots, but Natanya Rubin, the woman who was actually shot in the face, told a different story. In 2024, she went public with what she'd been saying for 25 years. Sean Combs shot her, not Shine. But the jury at the time didn't see it that way. Diddy was acquitted on all charges, and Shine was convicted of assault and reckless endangerment. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for shooting a woman in the face. And after serving his term, he was deported to Belize. He had been born there before his family moved to Brooklyn, and he couldn't return to America, the country where he'd built his career and lost his freedom. In a 2024 documentary, Shine described what had happened. He said, "When I was an 18-year-old kid, just wanting to do nothing other than make my mother proud and make Belize proud, I was defending him, and he turned around and called witnesses to testify against me." He said that Diddy pretty much sent him to prison. Diddy walked out of the courtroom a free man, and his teenage artist went to prison for a decade. So our pattern from City College begins, and now someone else is paying the price for Diddy, allegedly. Either way, Diddy moves on, doesn't give a f. Before the Club New York shooting, there was another shadow hanging over Bad Boy Records. 2 of them, actually. On November 30th, 1994, at Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan, Tupac Shakur is in the lobby when 2 men walk in and shoot him 5 times. Miraculously, he survives, and he believes he knows who set him up. Tupac starts naming names and accuses Diddy and Biggie of knowing about the attack in advance. And Chuck Phillips, a reporter who interviewed Tupac during and after his incarceration, claimed that Diddy knew more about the attack than he had let on. And this is what began the East Coast, West Coast beef that would define 90s hip hop. I read Original Gangsters for a video last year, or was it 2 years ago? I forget. I think it was the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef when I read that video, to understand, to learn, obviously. It's incredible. It's incredible. The lore is insane. On September 7th, 1996 in Las Vegas, Tupac is shot in a drive-by after a Mike Tyson fight. He died 6 days later on September 13th at the age of 25. On March 9th, 1997 in Los Angeles, 6 months after Tupac's death, Biggie is shot in a drive-by after leaving a party. He died at the hospital as well at age 24. Both murders remained officially unsolved for years, with Biggie still being unanswered. But both highlight the lengths one might go to come out on top of rival rappers in the East Side, West Side conflict of the 90s. It wasn't until 2023, a man named Dwayne Kef D. Davis was arrested for Tupac's murder. During a 2008 police interview that would surface years later, Kef D made the claim that Diddy had put out a $1 million bounty on Tupac and Suge Knight's heads. Diddy has consistently denied any involvement in the death of Tupac, obviously, but in 2025, Kirk Burrows, a former Bad Boy co-founder who has filed his own civil suits against Sean Combs, made accusations in the Netflix documentary Sean Combs: The Reckoning, saying that he believes Diddy had a lot to do with Tupac Shakur's death, and that Diddy had ushered Biggie to his death by pressuring him to stay in Los Angeles despite the danger. Everybody has been throwing Diddy under the bus for a few years now. And once again, Diddy has consistently denied any involvement in the murder of Tupac, as well as Biggie. His spokesperson called the documentary a shameful hit piece, and the Las Vegas Police Department confirmed Combs was never considered a suspect. These are allegations from someone with his own legal disputes with Combs, not established facts. But those questions have followed Diddy for nearly 30 years, and they weren't the only questions people should have been asking about Diddy. While the public was debating rap beefs and unsolved murders, something else was happening inside Diddy's inner circle. Dawn Richard worked for Diddy from 2005 to 2013, and in her 2024 lawsuit, she described what she had witnessed during those years. According to the filing, she once saw Kim Porter, Diddy's on and off girlfriend and the mother of 3 of his children, leaving his recording studio in tears with visible facial injuries, including a lacerated lip. Now, Kim died in November of 2018 from lobar pneumonia. She was 47 years old, and her death has been ruled as a result of natural causes or death caused by pneumonia. But Dawn Richards' account from 2024 puts Diddy abuse allegations on a timeline that stretches much further back than people realize and are talking about now. According to Dawn's lawsuit, Diddy frequently threatened her during their years working together. He would say things like, "You want to die today?" ? And "I end people," which was more of a statement. And these weren't metaphors, but he believed himself to be a really hard man. And things like that, coming from a man with his power and resources, these could easily be warnings. And then there was Cassie. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video. You know how every January we say we're gonna start prepping our own food, we're gonna get healthy. Then we chop veggies for 2 hours, cut our finger. Oh! And then in failure, go ahead and order a Hamburglar anyways. That is where Factor comes in. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, chef-crafted meals right to your front door. And they're genuinely delicious with a ton of different options to choose from. So no cooking, no dishes, you get a delicious meal delivered right to your door without having to think. No more, "Oh great, I burned the broccoli, now I smell farts." And I didn't even fart. You can choose calorie smart meals, low carb, keto, vegetarian, whatever you want. Lately, my favorite have been the Protein Plus meals because they have over 30 grams of protein in their serving size, which is incredible. And these meals are clean label. They don't use terrible dyes or anything like that, which is epic. So for this new season, if you want to eat intentionally without actually having to do all the work, Factor is the move. Head to factor75.com and use OOMPAFB50 as your discount code. You'll get 50% off your first box and free breakfast for a year. That's OOMPAFB50 at factor75.com. Click the link in the description. Let's get it. By 2007, Cassie Ventura was living in Diddy's world. According to her lawsuit, the controls started almost immediately. What she wore, who she talked to, where she went. It was a relationship that looked glamorous from the outside, but was a cage from the inside looking out. And she wouldn't escape for 11 years. And when she finally did, she had a story that would bring down Diddy's entire empire, essentially. Cassie Ventura's lawsuit was filed on November 16th, 2023, and runs 35 pages. It covers 11 years of her life. And what it describes is systematic abuse on a scale that's difficult to process with the juxtaposition of glamour that comes out of that world. Diddy's white parties, for example. I mean, it's just like the pinnacle of, it's what people dream about becoming, rich, famous, living the celebrity lifestyle. According to Cassie's filings, Diddy frequently subjected her to what she would call savage beatings. He controlled every aspect of her life, and when she tried to leave, he threatened to destroy her career, to release intimate recordings, or to hurt the people that she loved. And the beatings weren't even the worst part of it. The lawsuit introduced a term that would later appear 27 times in Diddy's federal indictment, things called freak-offs. According to Cassie, these were multi-day sexual performances that Diddy orchestrated. She was forced to have sex with male prostitutes while Diddy watched and recorded. She was even given drugs to keep going: ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine, GHB, and sometimes the sessions lasted so long that participants needed IV fluids afterwards to recover. And according to Cassie, Diddy recorded everything, and those recordings were his insurance policy. Blackmail. We live in a nation of blackmail, if you guys hadn't realized, from politics to Hollywood. If anyone tried to leave or talk, he had leverage. Tiffany Red, a friend of Cassie's, testified about the dynamic. She said, the only time he was willing to work on her music is when she had a freak off. And if you remember the hotel footage from the top of this video, the footage of Diddy beating Cassie in the hallway, that was from March 2016. According to her lawsuit, she'd already endured 9 years of this. And in 2018, Cassie finally escaped. She started dating a personal trainer, a fellow by the name of Alex Fine, and according to her lawsuit, when Diddy found out, he raped her. She got out, she married Alex, and they now have 2 daughters, but she kept all of the receipts and obviously levied them against Diddy back in 2023. And initially, Cassie's full account might have sounded unbelievable if it weren't for what federal investigators found when they raided Diddy's homes in March of 2024. 2 properties, one in Los Angeles, one in Miami, were both raided. Homeland Security agents in tactical gear busted in, and what they found inside confirmed the worst of the allegations. Over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. Not dozens, but over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. What? This is enough to suggest this was not occasional behavior. This was some kind of strange infrastructure for Diddy and his freak-offs. He didn't just go to Costco and buy a bunch of lube like he said. They also found 3 AR-15 style rifles with the serial numbers defaced, which is a big-time no-no and illegal to possess. Dozens of other firearms were found, which is, you know, everybody can own firearms as long as you're not a felon, at least, I guess. Along with mountains of electronic devices that investigators spent months analyzing. The freak-offs Cassie described weren't a fantasy, they were genuine operations. And according to the federal indictment, Diddy's staff booked hotel rooms specifically for these freak-off events. They arranged travel for the victims, and they made sure large amounts of cash were available at the spot. Then they cleaned up afterwards. So the system seemed to be that Diddy would lure women in with promises of career help or potential romantic relationships, and once they were in his orbit, the manipulation would begin. Drugs made them pliable, then he would record them to create blackmail, and his staff helped it all run smoothly like some kind of evil business. After Cassie came forward with her lawsuit, the floodgates opened. Audrey English worked as a go-go dancer at Diddy's white parties between 2004 and 2009, and according to her lawsuit, she was drugged and passed off to party guests for sex. Then we have Lil Rod Jones, who was a male producer who worked on Diddy's 2023 album called Love. And his lawsuit described constant constant groping and being forced to touch Diddy sexually, and witnessing what he called parties where minors were present. Quite a few of Lil Rod's claims have been dismissed, and his attorney did withdraw from the case, but his lawsuit added another dimension to the allegations. This wasn't just about women. Diddy's abuse apparently crossed every single line that could be crossed. Dawn Richard filed her lawsuit in September of 2024. It was sexual assault, sex trafficking, and false imprisonment. She'd spent 8 years watching what Diddy did to others, and eventually she says he did it to her too. And by the time the federal indictment came down, attorney Tony Busby was representing more than 120 Diddy accusers, men and women, some who'd been minors when the alleged abuse occurred, allegations spanning from 1991 to 2024. That's 33 years. So the Stampede, the Club New York shooting, the white parties, the freak-offs, all in different decades, but all with victims, all with the same pattern, and all with Mr. Diddler at the very center. So Cassie filed her lawsuit on November 16th, 2023, and one day later, on the 17th of November, the lawsuit was settled. In one day, Cassie accused Sean Combs of years of abuse and sex trafficking, and within 24 hours, Diddy's team made the case go away. And the reported settlement was $20 million. There was no discovery process, no depositions, no chance for either side to gather more evidence. Diddy didn't fight the allegations in court. He just paid them to disappear as fast as humanly possible. His attorney issued an obvious statement and said, Mr. Combs vehemently denies these offensive and outrageous allegations. Here's $20 million. The settlement in 2023 bought silence on Cassie's specific case, but it did not stop what started to come next. Within weeks, more accusers would come forward. Joey Dickerson-Neal said Diddy had drugged and assaulted her in 1991 when she was a Syracuse University student. Another woman, identified as a Jane Doe, alleged similar abuse from 2001, and by the end of 2023, there were lawsuits piling up. Diddy vehemently denied everything. Just because I gave someone $20 million one day after a lawsuit doesn't mean that I'm guilty, and doesn't mean that's how it doesn't work like that, guys. When you give someone $20 million to shut up, it doesn't mean that you're guilty at all. And that's just how it works. So he vehemently denied his guilt, but it certainly showed that his empire was vulnerable to actual genuine allegations coming from an actual genuine source. It's worth $20 million to get it to stop. So lawsuits and allegations start piling up. Diddy gets raided in March of 2024, and then on May 17th, 2024, CNN publishes the hotel footage. The video someone paid apparently $100,000 to bury. Now the whole world could see Sean Combs grab Cassie and abuse her. And it is not ambiguous in any way. There's no possibility of spin. The footage showed exactly what Cassie had described in her lawsuit, and the next day, Diddy had paid to get that lawsuit settled. And obviously, apology is completely meaningless. It just made everything worse for him. He wasn't denying it anymore. Now he's admitting to it on video legally after the $20 million settlement. It looks really, really, really bad across the board. It was with the Facebook apology that his supporters seemed to completely abandon him. Brands cut ties, and the music industry that for some reason looked the other way for decades suddenly could not distance itself fast enough. Then in September of 2024, the Diddler was arrested at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan. Diddy's lawyer said later that they'd be negotiating a possible voluntary surrender to authorities. They spoke of the fact that Diddy had come to New York to turn himself in, but that claim does not match what actually happened. Homeland Security agents arrested Sean Combs in the hotel lobby, and the arrest wasn't scheduled, and it wasn't coordinated with the legal team. They grabbed him before any deal could be finalized. The next day, prosecutors unsealed the indictment. There were 3 counts: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, and transportation to engage in prostitution. This is federal indictment, by the way. This is what the government found some level of this enough to indict, arrest, and prosecute this man. And the indictment described Combs leading a criminal organization that used his businesses, staff, and personal associates to carry out abuse. At the arraignment, Diddy pleaded not guilty. His lawyers requested bail, offering $50 million and home detention with GPS monitoring, which is what every single sweetheart gets when they're rich and famous and powerful. Epstein, but the judge in this case said no. The argument was that Diddy was a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. which I think is perfectly valid and logical. Prosecutors even pointed to evidence that he'd already tried to contact accusers after the investigation began, and they mentioned the guns seized in the raids, the defaced AR-15s for some reason with no serial numbers, which is really suspicious. They also described a pattern of obstruction, then bail was denied. Rip Diddy. So Diddy goes to Arkham Asylum in Gotham. Just kidding, the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Then 8 months after his arrest, Sean Combs went to trial earlier this year in May. The courtroom was packed. Media from around the world had credentials. The public lined up outside for the few available seats. It's obviously a spectacle. Prosecutors warned the jury to prepare themselves as the evidence would include days-long drug-fueled orgies. There would be recordings. There would be testimony from survivors. There would be details that no one wanted to hear, but were obviously required to seek justice. At this point, most everything has come out. The prosecution has a lot to work with, and the defense strategy becomes clear very quickly. Attack the credibility of the accusers and argue that everything that had happened was consensual. These weren't victims, Diddy's lawyers argued. These were adults who made choices and now regretted them. It is the same playbook that has been used in every high-profile abuse case. Blame the victims, question their motives, suggest they want money or fame. And that's not to say that that hasn't been true. In some instances, it absolutely objectively has. But in this one, it's really not looking like it. The main question is whether the jury would believe it or not. And Cassie Ventura eventually took the stand to testify against Diddy. She'd already told her story in her lawsuit and had already seen the video go public last year, but now she was testifying under oath with Diddy sitting across the room, which is something else entirely. She described the first few years of their relationship, how the control started gradually, and how she wasn't allowed to have any male friends, how he'd track her location, how his mood could shift without warning. Then she described the abuse and violence, the first time he hit her, how she learned to read his moods to avoid setting him off, how she told herself it would get better. Then she described the freak-offs, how they started, how she was given drugs, how she had no choice but to participate in whatever Diddy had wanted with whoever he had brought in. Then how everything was recorded, and the defense cross-examined her for hours. They pointed to photos of her smiling with Diddy at events, and they highlighted her decision to stay in the relationship. They also suggested the settlement money was her real motive. So that's what the defense was saying, but Cassie and the prosecution did not waver. During Cassie's testimony, she also revealed the settlement amount from her 2023 lawsuit for the first time, which was $20 million. And by July 2nd, 2025, after deliberations that began on June 30th, the jury came back in less than an hour on the final day. The diddler was guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, not guilty on racketeering conspiracy, and not guilty on sex trafficking by force. It was a split verdict, and prosecutors had wanted the sex trafficking conviction because that charge carried the heaviest penalties and would have defined Diddy as a trafficker under federal law. But the jury did not go that far, but they did convict him on 2 felony counts. So Sean Combs, the music mogul worth hundreds of millions of dollars, was now a convicted criminal, not a sex trafficker legally, but rather a guy who wanted to do prostitution. On October 3rd, 2025, Judge Arun Subramanian handed down the sentence to the diddler. 4 years and 2 months in federal prison, plus a $500,000 fine with credit for time already served. Diddy will be eligible for release in May of 2028, and the judge denied a defense request for bail pending appeal. Lots of people called the sentence too light. And look at Harvey Weinstein, he got 23 years, but his first conviction took decades of accusation before anyone even believed the victims there. So who the knows? There's a lot of evil, bad people out there, though. We do know that. And that is really the end of the actual legal side of this. But it's not the end of the full story. There is a ridiculous revenge arc and a level of pettiness that I have never seen anywhere, in all honesty. This is absolutely crazy and a spectacle, and there's way more to this whole story. To understand the next part of this video, you have to understand the beef between Sean Combs, aka P. Diddy, and Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent. This started in the early 2000s. 50 Cent was coming up. He was hungry and aggressive. Diddy was already at the top. According to 50, problems began with an uncomfortable encounter. 50 said that Diddy asked to take him shopping. 50 said that that might be something a man says to a woman. And from that moment on, something felt very off, and 50 was not comfortable around Diddy. In 2006, 50 released a diss track that didn't just insult and diss Diddy, but rather accused him of knowing who killed the notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace. This is when the uncomfortable beef actually escalated into something severe. Business deals fell through. Maze, who'd left Bad Boy, couldn't sign with 50 Cent's label because of disputes with Diddy. Their vodka brands competed directly. Diddy had Ciroc and 50 had Effin'. I don't know shit about alcohol or whatever. For years, 50 was trolling Diddy on social media, memes, jokes, constant needling. And when the baby oil story broke, 50 posted about it immediately. When the raid footage emerged, 50 was ready with his commentary. It's unbelievable levels of pettiness, all right, guys? 50 had been watching and waiting, and when Diddy fell, he extrapolated all the value he possibly could from it. And as Diddy's legal troubles were mounting in 2024, 50 announced that he was producing a documentary and that Netflix had won the bidding war. It wasn't just commentary from the outside. It wasn't just a shitty YouTuber video. It would be an actual investigation into P. Diddy. The project had been in development for quite a while, and the timing was perfect. With every new lawsuit, every new accuser, every piece of evidence that emerged fed into the narrative 50 was building. During Diddy's final months of freedom before his arrest, he'd hired a videographer to document his life for some reason, and video crews were following him everywhere. It was supposed to be legacy content, material for his own projects, proof of his epicness and greatness, so he could tell his own story rather than the way he was being portrayed in the media. He would fight fire with fire. The only problem was that Diddy never paid the videographer, and according to Rob Shooter, Diddy's former publicist, there was never a signed contract. In fact, Diddy had a history of failing to have proper documentation for anything. Diddy was cheap and refused to do formal contracts. When Diddy got arrested, that videographer had hours of footage of Diddy in his homes, footage of his lawyers, footage of conversations where Diddy discussed the case, and without the contract, the videographer owned all of it. Guess who he sold it to? 50 Cent. And 50 Cent's production team. At least that's the belief. 50 has been hush-hush about how exactly it came to him, but he assures everyone, like myself, that it is legal and that they have the necessary rights while keeping the videographer's identity confidential. Then, just a few weeks ago, Sean Combs' The Reckoning, produced by 50 Cent, premiered on Netflix. The documentary included footage of Diddy telling his lawyers, "We're losing," just days before his arrest. It also featured Kef D's police interview about the Tupac bounty. It showed Kirk Burroughs accusing Diddy of involvement in both Tupac and Biggie's death. I watched it in its first week, and it pulled 21.8 million views. It became #1 on the platform, even briefly dethroning Stranger Things. By the way, season 5, garbage. Hated it. The man who'd spent decades controlling his image was being exposed with footage he'd created himself, but because he's a cheap son of a bitch, his enemy, his most petty enemy got it and made a documentary and put it on Netflix. Are you kidding? That is like an unbelievable level of L. Now, 50 could have stopped there. Documentary's a hit. Diddy's in prison. Nope. The revenge is not complete. To promote the documentary, 50 Cent did an interview with ABC News. Not a podcast, not a streaming show, broadcast television, ABC News. Why ABC News? Well, ABC is one of the few channels that inmates at Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution are allowed to watch. When someone posted this theory on social media, 50 Cent reposted it with a caption saying, "I thought about it. What's wrong with that?" So, there's a lot of layers to this. Diddy hired a videographer. Diddy did not pay the videographer. Diddy did not get a contract. The videographer sold the footage to Diddy's biggest enemy. Then that biggest enemy made a documentary that 21.8 million people watched on the biggest video streaming platform in the world. Then that enemy did a press tour specifically designed to be visible from the prison where Diddy is in. Am I getting that right? That is a level of humiliation that is impossible to really quantify in my chimp brain. So anyways, Diddy is in jail getting justice, although for not very long. He'll be out in May of 2028. when he gets out. I'm sure there's going to be an unlimited amount of civil lawsuits that will be waiting. The documentary with 21 million views and the insane level of pettiness from 50 Cent will exist forever. The hotel footage will never disappear. Nobody will ever forget. It seems like Diddy is completely This is the end of the party for this man. I think the idea of him being able to potentially defend himself by hiring a videographer to follow him around, that was like a pretty good idea and could have potentially worked for him. But he that up in a way that you really couldn't have planned. I mean, that seems insane. 50 Cent. So, anyways, guys, hope you all enjoyed. If you did, press the like button down below, and I will see you in the next video.